All right, so today we're diving deep right into UOB's 2023 annual report.
Yeah, let's get into it.
UOB, they've been a big name in finance since way back in 1935.
Yeah,
Global presence, impressive credit ratings, the whole nine yards.
absolutely.
But what really caught my eye with this report, honestly, is their focus on ASEAN.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So in this deep dive, that's kind of what we're going to try to unpack, right? Like,
Yep.
what does that ASEAN focus actually mean? How did they perform? And how are they going to keep those shareholders happy?
Yeah.
What's the plan?
Yeah, and that ASEAN focus is really key.
Yeah.
UOB sees massive potential in Southeast Asia, and they've been making some pretty bold moves.
I mean, they straight up call it building the future of ASEAN.
They do. It's right there in the report.
It's not just like a marketing thing either.
Right.
They were the first Singaporean bank to set up a subsidiary in Vietnam back in 2018
Wow.
and then launched TMRW, that mobile-only digital bank
Yeah,
over in Thailand in 2019.
they're definitely putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, they're walking the walk.
Yeah.
But to really understand this strategy, I think we got to break down how their business is actually structured, right?
Yeah, for sure. UOB has three main segments:
Okay.
group retail, group wholesale banking, and group global markets.
Okay.
Each one targets a different customer base, and that's really where we see their Asian strategy playing out in very specific ways.
All right, so let's break those down a little bit.
Sure.
Group retail, I mean, that sounds like, the banking that most of us are familiar with, right?
It is, yeah. It's your everyday banking for individuals and families, things like checking accounts, loans, mortgages, the basics.
Right.
But UOB is also really pushing their wealth management services within this segment,
Okay.
trying to help people grow their assets, especially as the middle class and ASEAN just keeps expanding.
So they're tapping into that rising prosperity in the region.
They are.
Makes sense. Okay. What about group wholesale banking, though? Who are they going after there?
So this is where they cater to the larger clients,
Oh.
big corporations, institutions. We're talking serious financial needs here. Things like trade finance, cash management, and specialized lending solutions.
Complex stuff.
Yeah, and their deep understanding of the ASEAN market really gives them an edge in this segment.
It's like they're becoming the go-to bank for any business that wants to expand within ASEAN.
Yeah,
They've got the local expertise
Yeah.
and, well, let's be honest, they've got the financial muscle.
for sure. They have the resources.
Okay, so that's two down. What about group global markets? That's the last one, right?
That's right. And it's a bit more, I'd say, high stakes.
How so?
Well, this is where they're handling all the treasury and capital markets activities,
Oh,
things
blah,
like
blah.
foreign exchange, interest rate management, and they even get into, derivatives.
So that's the higher risk, potentially higher reward side of things.
Yeah, you could say that.
It sounds like each of these segments has its own unique challenges and opportunities within ASEAN. But before we get too deep into that, how did these segments actually perform in 2023?
Well, overall, UOB had a very strong year.
Okay, good to hear.
Their net interest income, which, basically reflects the profit they make from lending,
Right.
it surged by a significant 16%, reaching $9.7 billion.
Whoa, 16%, that's a big jump. What drove that kind of growth?
I think a couple of factors were at play.
Like what?
First, you have the rising interest rate environment globally, which,
Right.
naturally boosts a bank's net interest income.
Yeah, makes sense.
But even more importantly, I think, was UOB's strategic acquisition of Citigroup's consumer banking business in 4 key ASEAN markets.
Right, that was a big move. They brought in a ton of new customers,
They
right?
did, boosted their total customer base to around 8 million.
8 million, wow. And it sounds like that integration is going pretty smoothly, too.
It is, yeah. Indonesia and Malaysia are already complete.
Nice.
Thailand's on track for the first half of 2024, and Vietnam by the end of 2025.
Okay, so they're steadily working through it. This expansion, it's not just adding to their customer base, though, right? It's also pushing them closer to becoming a domestic, systemically important bank.
Or a DSIB for short.
DSIB, right? Which means what exactly?
It means they're subject to stricter regulations from the Monetary Authority of Singapore.
So bigger footprint, more scrutiny, but also, I guess, potentially greater stability and trust.
Exactly.
It's a trade-off. But net interest income, That's just one piece of the puzzle, right?
It is.
What about their other revenue streams and their overall profitability?
Well, their fee income, which comes from things like wealth management and credit card services,
Right.
also saw a healthy increase, rising by 4% to reach $2.2 billion.
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
And their core net profit for 2023.
Soared by an impressive 26%, hitting a record $6.1 billion.
Okay, now we're talking record profit year. Gotta love to see it. But to really understand that success, I think we need to dig a little deeper into their financials, right?
We do.
What can you tell us about their balance sheet? What does it look like?
Well, their balance sheet reflects I'd say a very prudent and strategic approach.
Okay.
Their total assets grew by a solid 5% in 2023, reaching a hefty $385 billion.
Wow, that's a lot of assets.
It is, yeah. And a big driver of this asset growth was their loan portfolio, which expanded to $246 billion.
So they're actively lending, supporting businesses and individuals across the region, which, aligns with that whole ASEAN focus we were talking about.
It does.
But does that increase in lending also expose them to more risk?
Well, it's always a balancing act, right?
Right.
But remember, their liabilities, mainly customer deposits,
Right.
have also been growing steadily, reaching $321 billion.
Okay.
So that's actually a very good sign. It shows strong customer trust and confidence in the bank,
Makes sense.
which, mitigates some of the risk associated with lending.
Yeah, healthy deposit base, that's a good foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but let's shift gears a little bit and look at their income statement. We touched on net interest income and fee income.
We did.
But what about other significant line items? Anything interesting there?
Well, one thing that jumps out is that their trading and investment income more than doubled in 2023.
Really?
Yeah, and this was largely driven by some pretty savvy moves in commodities trading and liquidity management.
Okay, so they're not just relying on those traditional banking activities.
Right.
They're making smart investments to boost their earnings.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm guessing all those strategic acquisitions and expansion efforts, they don't come cheap, right?
No, they don't.
What about their expenses? What do those look like?
So their operating expenses did see a pretty significant increase, mainly due to investments in new markets,
Yeah.
upgrading their technological infrastructure, and, attracting top talent.
Spending money to make money. It's the classic strategy.
It is, and it makes sense if those investments translate into long-term growth.
Yeah, as long as it pays off in the end. And despite those higher expenses, did UOB manage to improve at all on their cost-to-income ratio?
They did. Yeah, they're becoming more efficient at generating profits.
Okay, that's impressive. Now let's talk about cash flow, the lifeblood of any business, right?
Yeah.
What does UOB's cash flow statement tell us?
Well, their cash flow from operations remains strong in 2023,
Good.
which is a really good indication of a healthy core business.
Right.
They also generated positive cash flow from investing activities,
Yeah.
primarily from the sale of some non-core assets.
So they're generating cash from their operations and strategically divesting assets when it makes sense.
That's right.
Smart moves. What about their free cash flow? The money they have left over after reinvesting in the business.
It paints a very positive picture. They have ample resources to reward shareholders, invest in future growth, and maintain a strong financial position.
Okay, so this is all sounding pretty promising.
Yeah.
But what does it all actually mean for shareholders specifically?
Right.
How is UOB planning to create and return value to them?
Well, UOB has a long history of rewarding its shareholders, and they have several strategies in place. Well, their dividend policy is a key component.
Okay.
And in 2023, they paid out $1.30 per share.
That's a solid dividend, especially for investors who are looking for that steady income, right?
Absolutely.
But what about those who are looking for potential capital appreciation? What are they doing on that front?
Well, they have active share buyback programs.
Okay.
In 2023, they completed a $500 million share buyback program, and they've already announced another one for 2024, this time for $750 million.
Wow. So they're returning capital to shareholders through both dividends and share buyback.
They are.
That's a good sign. And on top of that, they're also participating in capital markets, issuing bonds and sukuk,
Right.
which helps them raise funds for further growth and expansion.
It's a multifaceted approach to creating shareholder value,
Yeah, it sounds like they're pulling out all the stops.
Yeah.
But of course, past performance, it doesn't guarantee future results.
Right.
It never does. So what can we glean about UOB's prospects moving forward? Are they positioned for continued success?
Well, I think we should take a closer look at that in the next segment.
Sounds good to me. Let's take a break and come back to that. All right, so we've seen UOB had a killer 2023, right?
Yeah.
Record profits, strategic moves in ASEAN. But like you said, past performance doesn't guarantee anything in the future.
No, it doesn't.
What are some of the, I guess, the key factors that could really impact UOB's journey from here?
Well, I think, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
there are both internal and external forces at play, right?
Okay.
Internally, UOB is facing this ongoing challenge of integrating those businesses they acquired from Citigroup.
Right.
They're making good progress, but ensuring a smooth transition and actually realizing the full synergies of those acquisitions, that's going to be critical.
Yeah, it's like juggling, right? Multiple balls while riding a unicycle or something.
Yeah, something like that.
You got to keep everything balanced and moving forward at the same time.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's internal. What about external challenges? What could impact their growth from the outside?
Well, one thing that UOB acknowledges in the report is the weakness in the Chinese market.
Right.
The economic slowdown there, it has a ripple effect across the region, and it's definitely something they're keeping a close eye on.
Makes sense. A lot of Asian economies are pretty closely tied to China.
They are.
So
Yep.
any turbulence there, it could definitely impact UOB's lending and investment activities in the region.
Absolutely. And then you also have, the global interest rate volatility,
Right, which is,
which makes it harder to predict borrowing costs and, plan for the future.
it's a challenge for any bank, but especially one with such a broad footprint like UOB.
For sure.
It's like trying to sail a ship through unpredictable waters.
Yeah.
You got to constantly adjust your course.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But it's not all doom and gloom,
Okay, good.
UOB is also very aware of the opportunities that are out there,
Yeah.
particularly in the booming ASEAN economy.
Right.
We're talking about a young and vibrant population, tons of foreign direct investment flowing in, and a rapidly growing middle class.
So lots of potential customers for a bank like UOB.
A lot, especially with their focus on retail and wholesale banking in the region.
Yeah, but a growing market, that also attracts more competition, right?
It does.
How is UOB differentiating itself in that landscape?
That's where their digital innovation strategy comes into play.
Okay, tell me more.
They've been investing heavily in their digital platforms, things like UOB Infinity and their mobile banking app.
Right.
They're trying to create a seamless and personalized customer experience.
Which is crucial these days.
It is, absolutely, especially in today's digital age.
Yeah, it's not enough to just offer those traditional banking services anymore.
No, not at all.
You got to meet customers where they are, and increasingly that's online and on their mobile devices.
Exactly.
But what about the risks that come with operating in this digital world, right? Cyber attacks, data breaches, these are serious concerns for any financial institution.
Oh, absolutely. UOB is acutely aware of those risks, and they've been ramping up their cybersecurity measures and internal controls.
Okay.
They also recognize the importance of reputational risk,
Right.
Any missteps in data security or ethical practices, that could severely damage the trust they've built with customers.
Yeah, trust is everything in banking.
It really is.
And speaking of trust, investors are really starting to look at a company's commitment to sustainability and social responsibility.
Yeah, for sure.
Where does UOB stand on that front?
Well, this is an area where UOB has been making a conscious effort.
Okay.
They've launched green financing products, set targets to reduce their carbon footprint, and they're actively promoting financial inclusion.
So they're taking steps in the right direction, but is it enough to really satisfy investors and customers who are demanding more transparency and action on ESG issues?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yes,
Sustainability, it's not just a buzzword anymore, it's a core business consideration.
it is.
And UOB, like other financial institutions, they're going to need to keep pushing the envelope
Yeah.
and demonstrate a genuine commitment to ESG principles.
All right, so it sounds like they've got their work cut out for them,
You do.
balancing those growth ambitions with these evolving expectations.
Yeah.
But let's circle back to those key metrics that investors love to scrutinize, right?
Sure.
What can you tell us about their return on equity and capital adequacy ratios?
Well, UOB's return on equity, or ROE, jumped to an impressive 14.2%,
Okay,
which shows they're using shareholder capital very efficiently.
that's good.
And their capital adequacy ratios, which basically measure their financial strength and ability to absorb losses,
Right.
remain well above regulatory requirements.
So they're profitable, well-capitalized, and committed to shareholder value creation.
They are.
But as with any business, there are always potential challenges and uncertainties.
Always.
What would you say are the biggest ones facing UOB moving forward?
I think navigating the competitive landscape in ASEAN will be crucial.
Okay.
There are so many other banks, both local and international, all vying for a piece of the pie. UOB will need to really leverage its strength, like its deep regional expertise and digital capabilities, to stay ahead of the curve.
It's like a game of chess,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
They need to anticipate their opponent's moves and make strategic decisions to gain that competitive advantage.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the ongoing challenge of managing risk, especially in today's, volatile global environment.
Right.
Economic slowdowns, geopolitical tensions, cybersecurity threats. These are all factors that could impact UOB's performance.
So they need to be agile, adaptable,
Yeah,
ready to adjust their strategy as the landscape shifts.
absolutely.
But, I mean, looking at their track record, I'd say they've demonstrated resilience and an ability to navigate through tough times.
I agree. They weathered the Asian financial crisis remarkably well.
They did.
And I think they've learned some valuable lessons from that experience.
Yeah, so they've got the experience, the resources, and the strategic vision, it seems like.
They do.
But the million-dollar question is, can they capitalize on those opportunities in ASEAN while managing all these risks to actually become the leading financial institution in the region?
Well, let's unpack that very question in our final segment.
So can they actually pull it off? Can UOB become like the top dog in Argentine finance? I mean, they've got a lot going for them, but there's a lot of competition out there.
Yeah, it's a crowded field for sure. But you have to remember UOB has a few key advantages, right?
Okay, like what?
Well, first, their deep understanding of the region, right? They've been operating in ASEAN for decades, building relationships, building expertise
Right.
that newer entrants just don't have.
Yeah, it's like they have that home field advantage.
Exactly.
They know the terrain, the players, the rules of the game.
They do. And second, their commitment to digital innovation, right? They're not afraid to invest in technology and develop new platforms to really enhance that customer experience.
Yeah.
They're not just playing catch up, they're trying to lead the way in digital banking in ASEAN.
I mean, they're mobile-only bank, TMRW.
Right.
That's a perfect example, right?
It is.
They're not just replicating traditional banking services online.
No.
They're creating innovative solutions specifically for, like, the mobile-first generation.
Exactly. And third, their focus on sustainability,
Right.
as we talked about. Investors and customers, they're increasingly looking for companies that align with their values, right?
They are, yeah.
So UOB's commitment to ESG principles, that could give them a real edge.
How so?
It could attract both capital and customers who prioritize those issues.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So they've got the local knowledge, the digital prowess, the sustainability focus.
Yeah.
But what about their ability to actually execute right?
Right.
Can they actually deliver on these ambitious goals?
That's the million-dollar question,
Right.
right? And honestly, only time will tell.
Yeah.
But their track record, I mean, it suggests they have the capability and the determination to succeed. They've consistently delivered strong financial performance, made those strategic acquisitions, and adapted to changing market conditions.
Right. And they've shown a willingness to embrace innovation and, really challenge the status quo. Like, for example, their partnerships with fintech startups.
Yeah, that's a great example.
They're not just trying to build everything in-house.
Right.
They're collaborating with others to tap into new ideas and technologies.
That's a smart approach, especially in today's landscape.
It is, yeah. No single company can do it all alone anymore.
Nope,
Collaboration is key, and it seems like UOB gets that.
they do.
Yeah.
So it sounds like UOB has a solid foundation, a clear strategy, and the right mindset to compete in ASEAN, right?
They do. But they're always unknowns, right?
Of course.
Unforeseen challenges that could pop up along the way.
Yeah, the global economy is unpredictable. Geopolitical risks can emerge.
Right.
New competitors could disrupt the market. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
UOB will need to remain agile and adaptable, constantly assessing the landscape and adjusting their course as needed.
It's like navigating a ship through uncharted waters.
Yeah.
You got to be ready for anything.
Exactly. But I think the most important thing is that UOB has a clear vision of where they want to go, and they seem to have a roadmap to get there.
Okay.
They're not just reacting to market forces, they're proactively shaping their own destiny.
Well said. Well, this deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
It has.
UOB is definitely a company to watch in the Asian financial landscape.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how they continue to evolve and navigate the challenges and opportunities ahead,
Yeah, for sure. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into UOB's 2023 annual report.
It does.
Hopefully you've gained some valuable insights into this ambitious and dynamic financial institution.
I hope so.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep asking those thought-provoking questions.
Always.
And remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to this crazy world of finance.